Hello everyone, welcome back. You're watching Empyrion Galactic Survival episode 93. I'm Enigmius and today we are everywhere. We're all over the damn place, except all in the same place at the same time. It's very bizarre. It's the easiest way that I can describe it. We've got a number of things going on. We started in the last episode, we built a superstructure thing that's sort of sitting on top of the arms that reach around the side of the ship. And make the whole thing look like the ship is carrying the hangar. It's kind of a bizarre sort of thing. We've got the lift thrusters in the arms as well. You can see now what we're doing is we're moving this section forward towards the front of the ship. We're building out towards the front of the ship, and we're also building in. We're curving it in towards the middle of the ship. We've got a little bit of a flat detail across the top there, right below the top row of blocks. Kind of looks a little bit interesting, but again, time will tell whether or not it continues to look interesting. This is where we've got a number of decisions to make, because this whole section that we're looking at, this curved section from the sides of the ship moving towards the front, is purely cosmetic. It's basically a structural connection from the sides of the ship to the part of the ship that will eventually wind up holding the bridge. And the bridge will be held in the front of the ship, just off the front of the hangar, so that it's not blocking the hangar door, but it's kind of moving down a little bit towards it, if that makes any sense. So if this section here that we're working on looks bad enough that it's distracting, then that's going to be kind of a design killer. And at the same time, if it looks dull to the point where it's not worth looking at, then that too, it's going to be large enough that you say there were a couple of interesting things on the ship, but ultimately it wasn't that interesting. So we want to avoid both of those scenarios. It's ugly and I always want to look at it because it's the ugliest thing there, versus it's so plain it doesn't add anything to the ship, it actually takes away from it. Neither of those is a particularly helpful situation to be in. And one of the things that I decided to do that I ultimately wound up pretty happy with is, you can see we've got the front of the arm on the right hand side of the screen, and we're looking at the flat section, and it's got this really weird profile just because of the way the curves on the arm came together. So by adding this little aesthetic detail that I'm putting in now, we obscure a part of that to the point where it's no longer distracting to see the front of the arm, because we've got enough other things going on that are kind of interesting that it's not the first thing you see is that weird sort of profile in the front. At the same time, we've got this flat section on the wall, and if you look, there's a bunch of curved blocks down on the bottom of the wall that I'm referring to, just for a point of reference, and above that it's just a flat wall, which again is kind of dull and not interesting. And by attaching this aesthetic element to that, we solve that problem as well. So we end up with this part of the ship that serves no practical purpose. It doesn't hold any equipment, it doesn't hold any weapon, it's not a strategic armor point where we're adding a bunch of extra armor to a point that's going to need it. It's just something that we're putting there for the sake of how it looks. It's not especially expensive in terms of the number of blocks that we need, and it does a good job of doing what it's supposed to do, which is just to add a little bit of interest in that particular area and distract from some potentially ugly bits in a way that works in our favor. So that was kind of a good thing in the way that worked out. You can see we just put in sort of a roof element. We'll probably add some more detail up there as well. Jumping forward to the next day, it's daylight time. Here we go with these round blocks, and I'm removing them because I actually like the round blocks. If I used them more, I would probably have been more motivated to keep them. And I replaced them with cubes, and if you look from the left of those cubes that I just placed over, we've got a bunch of cubes and they're touching the hangar, which is, again, a no-no. We're not allowed to do that. Our own rules, and we're not following them, but that's okay, because it's not difficult to fix, and it's not an area that we're saying is done. It's just what we've set up, and I haven't exactly gotten around to correcting, which we will fairly shortly. But what we did do by switching those rounded blocks for cubes was give ourselves a little bit more space to work and finish off this aesthetic section in a way that looks a little bit more symmetrical from top to bottom, fills it out a little bit more, and I was ultimately happier with than the one that we had originally put there, which I was happy with to begin with. So it was a win-win for me. And now all we have to do is we're finishing off this little transition in the corner with basically just using a pair of these 22.5 degree compound blocks so that it looks a little bit smoother than it could have looked with some of the other options. The detail is a little bit thicker. It's a little bit more uniform. Ultimately, I'm quite happy with that. And again, it's purely cosmetic. There's absolutely no functional purpose. One of the things that was in the back of my mind, and you'll see we're going to do a little bit of work on the floor here, and then we'll come back later, having stripped out all of this work that we're doing, to do some more work, is this idea of getting the floor worked out in such a way that I don't have to worry about forgetting not to contact the hanger anymore. So it'll be all done. It'll be coming up over, leaving a little bit of a space between the superstructure and the hanger, and I don't have to worry about it. But it's a question of figuring out exactly how I want to make that transition happen, because the area you're looking at here, that's the bottom of the arm and the bottom of the superstructure, is lower than the area where the actual floor, where the cockpit and all those other things are, is sitting. So we need to deal with that transition somehow, in some way that we're going to be happy with. But realistically speaking, for the amount of time that we're spending on this floor, it's kind of a mess trying to do something that's a relatively simple thing, because as important as I'm making it sound to not have these things contacting one another, the amount of time that you're actually going to be looking closely at the transition between the height of the floors to the center and all these other things is going to be minuscule, because it's going to be in this in-between area that you would have to specifically visit in order to see. So 6 of one, half dozen of the other. We could spend a lot of time here trying to make it look like a something, and as far as the rest of the world is concerned, it's a nothing, because they're never going to see it. The one detail that I was happy with the reworking, you can see we're back in working in that forward section again, is we had it coming straight down with the walls and then sort of 90 degrees to the floor. Is, as we're doing now, we're making it a sloping transition from the top to the bottom. So it comes around from the top, it goes out, and then it comes down a couple of blocks worth, and then it slopes back in. And you can see that's going in place precisely now. The idea here is that this starts to meet the criteria of having this section of the ship that's primarily a structural connection between the side of the ship and the central part of the ship that's going to be holding the bridge, in a way that makes it look interesting, but simple enough that it's not drawing your attention away from hopefully other more interesting parts of the ship. It looks big and beefy, like it's a competent structural member, and we don't have to worry too much about how we're going to manage the transition from that central area, because we've done a pretty good job of setting ourselves up with this particular part of the superstructure. So all in all, it was a pretty successful, I think, session trying to get all this put together and making progress in a way that we're going to be happy with what we've got. You can see now we've removed the floor that we had just put in, and we're starting to put in a slightly smoother, a slightly better transition using the 22.5 degree blocks, so that that step up from this arm to the central floor area will be a little bit more gradual and a little bit more refined. Realistically speaking, like I say, this is the part of the ship that you'll only see if you're specifically going out of your way to look at it, because you would probably either have to get in there with your jetpack or fly a drone in order to see it by the time it's mostly done. I'm going to leave the commentary here, because there's not much more to say about what we've done this episode. You can see a little bit more about how we're putting this floor together and how it's coming together in the next episode. More progress, and just like this particular episode, I don't have a specific plan for what I'm going to be working on in the next episode. There's a number of different things that I could choose, so for now we're just going to go with what we've got, which is what we've done, and in the next episode we'll do some more. So if you want to be notified about the next episode, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Links for social media are always in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.